An Air Asia plane carrying 162 people from Indonesia to Singapore disappears mid-flight. The US-led NATO mission in Afghanistan officially ends 13 years of combat operations. At least one person dies and hundreds remain stranded as a ship catches fire near Greece. And mass flooding kills at least 24 people in Sri Lanka and displaces more than 100,000 in Malaysia. Good evening, you're watching i24 News. An AirAsia plane disappeared with 162 people on board, the second mysterious aviation incident this year. Uri Shapira has more.
9 months after the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 shook the world, it is facing another mysterious aviation incident, this time in neighboring Indonesia. An AirAsia plane heading for Singapore went missing Sunday, along with its 162 passengers. Most of the passengers are adults, but 16 children and 1 infant were on board. Officials in Jakarta said the search efforts have top priority.
The Indonesian government has ordered the National Search and Rescue Agency, Air Force, Navy and Army, as well as local governments, to mobilize every effort and piece of equipment in search of this plane at sea and on land.
Flight 8501 took off Saturday from Surabaya, the second biggest city in Indonesia, and was halfway to its destination before it dropped off the radar screen. The last communication between the pilot and air traffic control was Saturday, 23:24 GMT, when the pilot asked permission to change route due to bad weather.
It is a terrible feeling of loss right now, but it is premature. I think the Indonesian authorities are doing their best now for the search and rescue.
2014 was not a good year for aviation companies, especially those from Southeast Asia. In March, a Malaysia Airlines aircraft was lost with all 239 passengers and crew, and in July a plane from the same airline was shot down in Donetsk Oblast in eastern Ukraine, killing all 283 passengers and 15 crew on board. The chief executive of AirAsia refused to speculate on what happened to the missing plane, and as for now, relatives of the passengers are still waiting for a sign of life.
The Islamic State terror group has reportedly killed more than 1,700 civilians in Syria over the past 6 months. The British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the group also killed 120 of its own members, most of them foreign fighters trying to return home. IS has regularly released videos of executions of captured enemy fighters, activists and journalists. The US-led coalition in Afghanistan formally ended its combat mission today, leaving Afghan forces to battle the Taliban insurgency largely on their own. More on the historic day from Ayman Siksak.
US-led forces in Afghanistan formally ended their combat mission on Sunday, 13 years since the first airstrikes were launched against Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda.
Today, NATO completes its combat mission. A 13-year endeavor filled with significant achievements.
But hopes for a so-called end to military involvement in Afghanistan are largely unfounded. Some 13,000 foreign troops will remain under a new mission to focus on training Afghan troops. But as NATO lowers its flags on the Afghanistan mission, insurgency is rising in the country. 2014 saw more than 3,000 civilians killed in Afghanistan by the end of November, and around 5,000 of Afghanistan's security forces were killed in confrontations with Taliban fighters in 2014 alone. Nonetheless, the tone at the NATO ceremony held in Kabul was one of confidence.
Our resident support mission reflects NATO's continued investment in Afghanistan's future. Our commitment to Afghanistan endures.
But it seems that for Afghanistan's people, foreign troops in the country may be decreasing in number, but the internal war is only changing for the worse.
And Iran conducted massive military exercises for the 4th straight day. This comes after a top US senator warned the Islamic Republic that sanctions were alive and well. i24 News reporter Shaiban Ari has the details.
The Islamic Republic of Iran conducted a series of missile exercises Sunday, the 4th day of a massive military drill described by Iranian military officers as the widest in Iranian military history. Among the missiles being tested was the Shalamche, a mid-range air defense system meant to target incoming aircraft, essentially a third-generation evolution of the Hawk missile. The missile exercises were said to be the largest of their kind in 35 years. The drill, conducted near the Straits of Hormuz and codenamed Muhammad, Messenger of God, includes naval exercises as well as ground maneuvers, with around 13,000 troops involved. The drill also marked an opportunity for Iran to test out its new suicide drone, the Yasir, described by officers as a mobile bomb. Iranian media have even boasted of U.S. naval vessels leaving the area of the drill following warning messages from Iranian planes. Some have speculated that the current drill is meant to signal Iranian support for its Houthi Shiite allies involved in internal conflicts in Yemen. But despite the emergence of common interests between Iran and the West in the fight against IS, tensions remain in place over the Islamic Republic's nuclear program, with a new deadline for a resolution set for July 1st. While visiting Israel over the weekend, U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham noted the U.S. Congress would be keeping up the pressure with new sanctions-related legislation expected to be voted on in January.
If Iran walks away from the table, sanctions will be reimposed. If Iran cheats regarding any deal that we enter into with the Iranians, sanctions will be reimposed. It is important to let the Iranians know that from an American point of view, sanctions are alive and well.
One message of support to the Islamic Republic will likely be arriving in the near future, with Iranian state media reporting that Hamas leader Khalid Mashal, who was in Turkey over the weekend, will soon be making a visit to Tehran.
None other than the deputy ambassador of the Palestinian Authority in Tehran said he is excited with Iranian ruler Khamenei's commitment to transfer arms to the West Bank, adding, and I quote, "The Zionist regime is a cancerous growth that sooner or later must be removed."
Such statements, as well as the expected visit by Mashal, serve as further indications that the Iranian regime is repairing its relationship with Hamas.
And a ferry carrying 466 people caught fire off the Greek island of Corfu today, forcing authorities to evacuate the ship. At least one person died and hundreds remain stranded aboard the Italian-flagged Norman Atlantic, which was traveling from the Greek port of Patras to Ancona, Italy. Authorities have launched a major rescue operation with over 150 people saved so far.
We are doing everything we can to save those on board, and no one will be left helpless in this tough situation. It is one of the most complicated rescue operations that we have ever done, and for which the assistance of multiple forces is needed. Fortunately, the ships sailing nearby are sufficient to give us optimism that we can save the human lives.
Severe weather has left at least 24 people dead in Sri Lanka. An estimated 1 million others have been significantly affected, prompting the government to deploy the armed forces to provide relief. Other parts of Southeast Asia also being hit by extreme weather. Here's more.
Malaysia's worst flooding in 30 years has already killed at least 10 people and forced some 160,000 to flee their homes across the country. Victims accuse the government of being slow to provide assistance.
We stuck here 3 days, but they just come here after 3 days. They should not do like this, because we totally lost for everything. We just here without food, not enough food.
There is particular outrage at Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak after the release of photos showing him playing golf with U.S. President Barack Obama during the storms. In response, Razak announced more money to be spent on aid for victims once the floods subside.
The government will allocate an extra $143 million to help flood victims.
Supplies were being delivered Sunday to northern areas in the country as rescue teams struggled to reach those in the path of the torrential monsoon. More heavy rainfall is predicted for the coming days, and many residents have had no choice but to camp in rescue shelters. Others prefer heading for higher terrain. Meanwhile, neighboring Thailand has declared a state of emergency after floods killed at least 13 people in its southern provinces.
That's all for now. Join us for the latest updates at the top of the hour. And for more breaking news, you can find us on our website, i24news.tv, and follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. I'm Shachar Peled. Thank you very much for watching.